Senator Christine Cohen. I am the Senate Chair of the Transportation Committee. I'm joined here by my House Co-Chair, Representative Roland Lamar. It's good to see so many people out here today, though we are disappointed for the reason behind this press conference. The regs have been pulled from the Regs Review Committee pertaining to the adoption of the Clean Car Standards. Most of you know that it was over 2 decades ago that we passed the standards, the California emission standards for light-duty vehicles in a very bipartisan way. And just a couple of years ago, we passed the same standards for medium and heavy-duty vehicles together as a Transportation Committee and an Environment Committee. We had a lot of collaboration on this policy, collaborating all along the way, ensuring that we were taking the proper steps to ensure that these were good moves from a policy standpoint. Manufacturers are all moving in this direction. We want to support businesses as they make this important transition towards electric vehicles and alternative fuel sources. We have unprecedented funding right now from the federal government to allow us to create the charging infrastructure necessary, together with the Commissioner of DEEP, the Governor, the Commissioner of the DOT. There is an EV roadmap that the state has laid out. So far, 10 states have adopted the regulations to align with the California light-duty emission standards. A similar number of states have aligned with California emission standards for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. So this is really about a regional partnership, being good regional partners, and making sure that we all have clean air to breathe and moving in that direction as we all attempt to electrify, making sure that we are aligned with manufacturers and businesses, making sure that we are aligned with the residents of the state who are making choices to drive cleaner cars. This is good policy, and we intend to move forward with this policy in a very thoughtful way. The forces all align when we do that. We know that economic forces will align, driving prices down, making sure that there are considerations to make sure that folks have more money in their pocket at the end of the day when they make these choices to switch to electric vehicles. We have already established a robust rebate program here in the state of Connecticut, together with my co-chair and my predecessor, the Senate Chair of the Transportation Committee. We have increased rebate numbers for the residents of the state of Connecticut, and we will continue to look at that to make sure that these are affordable prices for the residents of the state. Those forces will align, the economic forces, the infrastructure, the environment, and the technology. So today we march forth recognizing that this is good policy, that we have adopted good policy, and we need the regulations to align with that policy so that we can move forward in a thoughtful manner. The next speaker today, and you'll hear from several today, I mean, we have such a great group of legislators here who have all been so supportive of this along the way. But the next speaker has really been a leader on this, and so many issues pertaining to environmental health across the state. She embodies unwavering dedication to our state's environmental welfare. Her tireless efforts and advocacy stand as a beacon to the preservation of our natural resources and for the promotion of sustainable practices. Throughout this process of developing the regs, I have observed Commissioner Dyke's thoughtful approach, her desire to meet the needs of the business community, her collaboration as a regional partner, and her willingness to understand and address concerns. Her role as commissioner has positioned us as a leader in the nation. Commissioner Dykes.
Thank you so much, Senator Cohen, for those extraordinarily generous words. I'm really glad to be here today and on behalf of our agency to speak about these regulations. You know, Connecticut has some of the worst air quality in the country, and our kids and our vulnerable communities, especially environmental justice communities living near highways and industrial zones, are disproportionately experiencing asthma and respiratory illness disrupted lives, and high medical bills because of it. 2/3 of the air pollution that's generated in our borders comes from vehicle exhaust, from internal combustion engine vehicles. And this is why Connecticut has been a national leader on clean transportation for more than 2 decades. This transportation sector also generates 40% of Connecticut's greenhouse gas emissions. And so it will be nearly impossible for us to meet the state's Global Warming Solutions Act targets of reducing greenhouse gas emissions 45% by 2030 without vehicle emission standards in place. We were one of the first states to adopt the more stringent passenger vehicle emission standards. We did so voluntarily in the late 90s. In 2004, the General Assembly made it mandatory for DEEP to adopt these vehicle emission standards. 6 times since then, DEEP has received approval from the Legislative Regulations Review Committee to keep those standards up to date, as greater emissions reductions have become more technologically and economically feasible. Just a year and a half ago, the legislature also authorized our agency to implement similar emission reductions for medium and heavy-duty vehicles, which represent only 6% of the vehicles on the road, but generate an outsized share of transportation emissions, especially on our highways and in industrial zones near environmental justice communities. Since that time, 9 states have adopted these more stringent medium and heavy-duty standards, and 11 states, including New Mexico and Colorado, have adopted the light-duty standards. I am extraordinarily proud of the staff at DEEP who have worked tirelessly to carry out what the legislature directed and authorized us to do. I'm extraordinarily proud of not just the diligent effort that they put into promulgating these regs, which the Attorney General's office determined were legally sufficient, and the nonpartisan Legislative Commissioner's Office recommended for approval. But I'm also exceptionally proud of the work that DEEP and the Department of Transportation, the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, and the DMV have put into planning for a clean vehicle adoption. We issued the electric vehicle roadmap in 2020 that Senator Cohen was just mentioning, and we have supported investments in electric vehicle charging around the state. We've expanded cheaper rebates for both new and used vehicles with a focus on making clean vehicles accessible and affordable, especially for Connecticut's rural and urban communities. And we've done all of this with the authority and support given to us by the General Assembly. Because of these efforts, we've seen incredible success and momentum in clean vehicle adoption this year. EVs are 10% of new vehicle sales. That's a 19% increase in electric vehicle registrations just over the last year. And we've seen a 30% increase in the availability of charging ports for electric vehicles in Connecticut just over the last year. And we are here at a moment when there's unprecedented federal funding available to further reduce the costs of electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging, including $52 million that the DOT is implementing from the bipartisan infrastructure law to expand charging and end range anxiety. We know that a pause in this momentum will make it harder to purchase an EV in Connecticut. DEEP looks forward to, we will be engaging with EPA on our options going forward, but most importantly, we look forward to continuing to engage with legislators and stakeholders and implementing whatever the next steps are for clean transportation in our state. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as I mentioned, I've been so impressed with the thoughtful consideration and preparation of not only your department, but the administration that's given the legislature the confidence to pass this policy in the past and to make it a possibility. We want these cars to be more affordable for folks across the state of Connecticut. We've already seen a 20% reduction in the price of electric vehicles over the last year. We will continue to see those prices come down. And we need the supporting regulation, the regulatory framework to make these things possible. And so while myself and many of my colleagues here have been focused on legislating around the climate crisis, none of this could be done without the backing of Senators Looney and Senator Duff, who are true environmental champions. Both leaders were here when We adopted California's light-duty standards in a bipartisan way, and both helped me tremendously when we passed Connecticut's Clean Air Act last year, which included the medium and heavy-duty standards. With that, Senator Looney.
Thank you so much, Senator Cohen, and wanted to begin by thanking you for all of your work on this issue as a leader on environmental issues and policy issues of all that kind. To Senator Cohen and Representative Lamont from New Haven, her co-chair on transportation, both have really been visionary pioneers on the issue. I also wanted to give thanks to our Environment Committee co-chairs as well, Senator Lopes and Representative Gresco was here as well. And one of the things that I wanted to begin by just stating, taking the view of the future, we know that the gasoline-powered car is certainly on its way out. We will have all electric vehicles in the future, and we want to make that future happen as soon as we can. We also have to make sure that it happens in an equitable way, not leaving any communities behind. One of the things that we have to deal with is issues of cost. We're making some progress on that, bringing the cost of the typical electric vehicle down from where it is now. But another issue is in terms of charging. Right, since the advent of the mass-produced motor vehicle, people who fill up their cars do it the same way, whether you have a $100,000 plus new luxury vehicle or a clunker worth under $5,000. Everybody goes to the gas station. Now, some are buying diesel, some are buying premium gas, others are buying the basic 87 octane, but everyone goes to the same place. That won't be the future necessarily. We will have a divide between communities, say like Greenwich and some others, where most homes may have chargers in the future. But that won't be the case in places like Grand Avenue in New Haven or other places. People will be looking for convenient charging. So this will be for the first time we have a bifurcation based on economic class as to how you fuel your vehicle. That hasn't been the case up to now, and it will be in the future. So we have to factor that into our planning. Our commitment is strong to do this. We need to do it. We know the nation is moving in this direction, and this is something that, as part of environmental planning and part of energy planning, we will be there. But the market is going to move in the direction that we want to move in, and we know that to be the case. Connecticut is a relatively small part of that market. California is a huge part of it. But it is coming, and it is coming quickly. And I think many of the questions that some people may have today and some of the cautionary notes may well dissolve in a few years because the technology is moving so quickly that 5 years from now, I'm hoping that we may have a position where we look again at this issue and perhaps do maybe something along the lines of what Colorado and New Mexico have done. But we need to keep moving steadily in this direction because it is the future that we have to be responsible for. Again, we, not to be overly partisan, but we are the party of governing in Connecticut. We have to be responsible in governing for everyone. A Democratic governor, Democratic legislature. The Republican Party, unfortunately, is the party of no without thought, no without a plan. We have to plan. We have to think. We're responsible for this state. So thank you very much, and I'll call our Majority Leader, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Senator Looney. Thank you for your leadership. Thanks to my legislative colleagues who are here for their work and their leadership as well, especially Rep. Dathan, who's from Norwalk, and thank her for her work on the Regs Review Committee. You can give her applause if you want. Thanks to Governor Lamont and your administration as well. Let's just be clear, though, that this today is just merely a speed bump on our way to more electric vehicles here in the state of Connecticut. We're going to get there. We have a little bit of a speed bump here, but I know for a fact that the market is demanding and driving this issue. Consumers are driving and demanding this issue as well, and the state of Connecticut will make sure we continue to lead the way when it comes to cleaning our environment. There's been some, over the past, in the rhetoric over the last couple months, there's been talk about how if we compare ourselves to California or someplace else, and I would say I'd much prefer to compare myself in our state to California than I would to Mississippi. All respect to people from Mississippi. But California has clean air, they have a growing economy, they're one of the largest economies in the world. That's not the same for some of our other states that are not adopting these kind of clean air standards that people across our state and across our country are demanding. We're going to take on, and we have been taking on, climate change and global warming very aggressively in the state. As the commissioner said, we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to lead, and we're going to make sure that we make the best policy for the people of the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Duff. And you bring up a good point, because I think this is a point of confusion often. Why are we following California? And the fact of the matter is, we have two choices as a state when it comes to clean air standards. We can follow the more stringent California emission standards, or we can follow the EPA's Clean Air Act guidelines. And we chose, as I said, 2 decades ago for the light-duty vehicles to follow California's emission standards. It made complete sense at the time. It makes complete sense now. We do not want to be left behind as a state. We have always been a leader in this regard, and now we're watching as state after state adopts this policy, adopts the regs to support the policy. Manufacturers are moving in this direction, technology is moving in this direction, consumers are moving in this direction, and we in Connecticut want to have the policy and the regulations in place to support our residents in this venture. With that, nothing gets done in this building without both chambers being on board. And whether as chair of environment or transportation, my House chairs have always had the back of environmental priorities, and none of that would be possible without the leadership of the House, who recognize the need to curb climate change and to do so in all areas, in all communities. So I'd like to invite up Speaker Matt Ritter and Majority Leader Rojas.
Thanks, Senator Cohen, and also echo what Marty and Bob said, thanking the co-chairs, and also to really thank Representative Dathan, who, when I said you'd be great at reg review, she said, well, is there enough to do? There's enough to do, Lucy, I can tell you that. And she's done a great job. And look, let's start with a couple things, right? I was saying to someone this morning, NASA, why do I bring up NASA? They set goals. They set goals for when they wanted to land on the moon, when they want to land on Mars, and there's a reason you do that. If you don't have a goal and you don't have a target, especially when you're dealing with government, it doesn't happen. You need to have ambitious plans and designs to get where you want to get 11 years out, wherever it may be. And so the plan that we have in the state of Connecticut, and other states regionally, to get to a certain place in 2035 is really important. Connecticut, as 1% of America's population, will likely not dictate the market forces of electric vehicles. That'll be dictated by others. But our inaction will cause us to fall behind in our state and what we do here in Connecticut. That's why the target is so important. Yeah, it's important. If you don't have goals and you don't have statutory requirements, it can drift governor to governor, speaker to speaker, commissioner to commissioner, chair to chair. We have a lot of building we have to do. A lot of infrastructure has to go in, and we can't lose sight of that. Now, let's also talk about the other side of this. Our party sometimes has a wag our finger approach to individuals who may not always see it the same way. Affordability is real. Technology is real. As the Senate President brought up, charging at your home and the cost of electricity, these are real concerns that can't be just shooed away. They can't be wished away. They have to be worked on. And you have to show people and demonstrate with actual science and showing dollars and cents how cars are becoming cheaper and where they're going to be. I think, and I've heard from colleagues, and I want to thank all my colleagues for being here. Here's what they've said to me in the last 48 hours. We should have a committee that looks at affordability, constantly updating on a year-to-year basis how much costs have gone down. Have they gone down? We should have a committee looking at the technology, make sure that the state of Connecticut and DEEP guarantee they're building EV stations and meet those targets. The state maybe should subsidize the further development of those sites. We had a Pura docket where we denied the ability for a utility to recover installation of EV. That should be changed by state statute. So we have things we need to do internally that can be part of a larger bill. But once you get off target, once you don't have a goal, you will surely fail. But we have to do more. We have to demonstrate to the Connecticut residents that this switch not only will save the environment, save lives and save our planets, but not leave you in a position where you can no longer afford a vehicle. There were questions about whether hybrid cars would meet it? When would we stop registering vehicles? All these things can be answered. I know the Transportation Committee will vet that. But let us please hear, maybe all of us not agreeing or disagreeing on this issue, be very clear to advocates. To chastise somebody who publicly says, I'm concerned about affordability for low-income residents, trust me, we're going to hear that in our caucus. And so we have to address that head on. That's why, whether it's New Mexico or Colorado, you have an automatic renewal of these provisions, or commissions that update on an annual basis to the legislature the progress we're making or we're not making. But the federal government's a key partner. Our regional states are key partners. We will get this done, but we're going to get it done not by admonishing, not by virtual signaling to everybody how right we are, by taking in commentary, taking in feedback, adopting those regs, but holding feet to the fire of our own state, making sure, I'll give you one more example and then I'll shut up and turn it over to Jason. Someone said to me, electric buses could cost 4 times or 3 times more, even in 5 or 6 years. So let's say we get rid of that, that's fine. But I represent the city of Hartford. We had a landfill for 60 years. We in Bridgeport are the city's 2 most impacted by car emissions, and we have the worst asthma rates in the state of Connecticut. So if buses cost 4 times more, why should Hartford have to solely bear the brunt of that on our taxpayers who are so amongst the poorest in the state of Connecticut? Maybe the state of Connecticut should help out the city of Hartford and the city of Bridgeport. These are conversations we have to have. And I guarantee you in our caucus, this is what we're going to hear when we talk about it. But when we address these things, when we have checkpoints, relief valves, we'll get there. And with that, I want to turn over to my amazing friend and partner, the Majority Leader, Jason Rojas.
Thank you, everybody, and good afternoon. I certainly want to thank Governor Lamont, Commissioner Dykes, and the entire team at DEEP for getting us to this point and remaining focused on this really important goal that we all have. And I'm not as pessimistic about the partisan nature of this debate based on what I've seen, based on what I've read from some of my Republican colleagues. It seems that we do have an opportunity for a compromise on this and to keep moving in the right direction that we need to move on. So we'll need to hold them to that when we get to the next legislative session, and as expected, we'll take this up. But I also think this is one of those primary policy issues that we as a legislative body or as government struggle to think about 10, 15 years from now. What's the world going to look like? I think the average consumer also struggles with what the world is going to look like in 10 to 15 years. And it's hard to see an answer. But what we know, if we look throughout history, right, I had a debate with a family member about this issue. And, you know, when the advent of the car really became popular in the early 1900s, well, there weren't highways, right? So we built them over time. We have the infrastructure that we have today. I think the same thing will happen here. We need to, as the speaker noted, we need to move in the direction of setting that goal, setting that target, and begin to work towards it. I think we have the ability to do that. And some of the arguments that have been made about these regulations are legitimate, as the speaker noted, about the cost of a vehicle. Is the infrastructure going to be there? Are we going to have the capacity to actually fund this increased electrical demand? I think, yes, we will get there. I don't know that we have a choice because the consequences are far too dire for us to continue to do nothing. So that as we look to the next couple months ahead and we look to the next legislative session, I'm actually encouraged. And as Senator Duff noted, this is a speed bump. We'll get over it. We'll move in the right direction and do what needs to be done on behalf of the residents of the state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader, and that's exactly right. Listening to the leadership of both chambers, we really need to recognize what the concerns are, hear these concerns. Some of them are legitimate concerns, and we need to address them as we move forward. One of those concerns that came up along the way is the grid ready for this? These initiatives take partnerships and collaborations. The policies and regulations just simply wouldn't work without a thoughtful plan of how we get there and what makes it feasible. As we talk about electrification, we obviously need to consider the grid, its capacity, its modernization, and if all ships are boarded and sailing in the same direction, so to speak. Here to talk a bit about that is Steve Sullivan from Eversource. Steve.
Thank you. From Eversource's standpoint, our job is to build the reliable infrastructure for our customers that want electric vehicles or other clean energy options. And that reliable infrastructure requires significant long-term investment. Now, the governor and the legislators have already achieved a level of fiscal stability for Connecticut, and I'm sure that working together, we can forge a path forward that enables companies like Eversource to make that investment in the electric grid. Our customers and our residents all want the same thing: clean, reliable energy at an equitable cost. And the best path forward to achieve that is through a constructive regulatory environment. A constructive regulatory environment enables a collaboration in the planning process and a strategic partnership between the state and the utilities in how we deliver a clean energy future. Now, the other states around us, they recognize that. New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, they all have very tough regulatory authorities, but those authorities have recognized the importance of a balanced approach. And again, that positive path forward is the best way to achieve reliable, clean energy for our customers and our residents. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Steve. We appreciate the partnership in moving this forward. And also, there's so many partners here in the room who have been with us every step of the way. And I said it just takes everybody coming around the table to really move this forward. So I do want to give a special shout out to the building trades, our friends in the building trades who have been with us on this, recognizing how we move forward together, creating more jobs in this green economy, and we couldn't do it without their support. Also, the environmental advocates, I see so many folks out here, and I will be remiss in naming all of them, but I see folks from the Nature Conservancy, League of Conservation Voters, and Save the Sound, and all of them are representing the needs and wants of residents across the state who demand clean air, who demand action on the climate crisis. And so they really have been there through thick and thin, trying to make sure that we are advancing as a state, trying to ensure that we are leaders here in the state of Connecticut. So I'd like to introduce one such advocate, Charles Rothenberger from Save the Sound.
Thank you so much. It's great to see such a crowd out in support of clean vehicle regulations. I won't repeat what has already been said, except to answer one question. How do we know that these regulations can be successful? Because they are successful. They have been successful here in Connecticut for 20 years, including the part of the regulations that requires auto manufacturers to deliver increasing numbers of clean technology vehicles to the state. Those regulations are currently being implemented. Probably nobody in the audience recognizes that because it is having very little disruption in your daily lives. But what it is doing is not dictating the market, it's harnessing the existing market forces for clean vehicles. And what we lose if we fail to take the next step and revise these regulations, first of all, we will essentially be withdrawing from this very successful program. Number two, we will be losing the advantage of these regulations in terms of consumers. Part of the regulatory paradigm is providing incentive to the manufacturers to deliver to participating states low-cost electric vehicles and hybrid electric vehicles. This is where the market is going. You've heard about the double-digit year-over-year growth in Connecticut and other states. If we truly care about providing affordable, clean vehicles to consumers, these regulations are the pathway. Otherwise, those vehicles are going to other states. I think we've been proud in the past to stand with our neighbors in New York and Massachusetts, Rhode Island, in implementing clean vehicle standards. I, for one, do not want to align our state policy with that of Alabama or Mississippi or West Virginia. They are not known for the best public health, and they are not known for the strongest economies. So I applaud the effort here today, and I look forward to working with all of the advocates, all of the legislators, and all of the stakeholders to successfully move these this session. Thank you.
next and last speaker really needs no introduction, but I do have to say I came into the legislature in 2019 at the same time the governor became our governor. And I was so impressed because one of his very first executive orders was an environmental consideration to ensure we were meeting our carbon emissions goals. He made those more aggressive, recognizing that we were in non-attainment, recognizing that we had to get more aggressive, we had to step it up as a state, recognizing that Connecticut's always been a leader, but we were going to continue to be a leader. And so every step of the way, every policy decision, everything he has done in partnership with this legislature has really been to consider the environment, to consider climate. And I'm so very proud to call him my governor. I will say he's been a fantastic regional partner. He has really been a leader for governors across the nation, but in particular in the region as we move this initiative forward. Governor Lamont.
I gotta tell you, as a business person, I like these goals. I like these standards. I like having a roadmap. I like to know where we're gonna be going and I can invest accordingly. And look, going back to when I was a kid, back when the environment was really bipartisan, I mean, even then I knew that swimming in Long Island Sound was yucky at the age of 9. And I heard my parents complaining about something called acid rain. There was a guy named Richard Nixon who stepped forward, put in place the EPA, put in place some really strong clean water standards. Didn't implement them overnight, implemented them over 20 years. You wouldn't believe the difference it is in Long Island Sound right now. Did the same thing with clean air standards. And sort of reminiscent of this debate, it was a couple years later in the mid-70s that we got buffeted by Saudi Arabian oil. They had us over a barrel, and do you remember that? It was Jerry Ford and Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan who said, we're gonna increase fuel efficiency standards. And over the course of the next 10 years, they doubled the fleet mileage per gallon from about 13 to 26 miles per gallon. I don't remember anybody complaining, oh, you've taken away my right to drive a gas-guzzling automobile. People said, this is the right thing to do, and it made a difference. It made a difference in terms of freeing us from being hostage to overseas oil. It made a difference in terms of lowering your cost of being able to drive an automobile, saved you, 50 cents on the dollar there, and made a difference in terms of the environment. And now we're going through a similar cycle again. And I've got to tell you, as a business person, one thing that drives us crazy is when government set clear standards, clear rules, say this is where you're going to go, you can invest accordingly, you can count on it, until you can't, until they change their mind. They were for it before they were against it. Now we're going to pull back on this. We're going to take a pause. We're not going to make a difference. Let me tell you, what does General Motors think? General Motors has already committed all electric 2035. Oh my God, is Connecticut going to be the first state to renege on a commitment we made on a strongly bipartisan basis just 2 years ago, on a unanimous basis back about 20 years ago? Look, everybody says, Ford has said, look, we're all electric in Europe. They've committed. We're going to hold off on being all electric in America to see whether this 2035 standard makes a difference. And Matt made a really good point about affordability. You want to make this more and more affordable? It's called get scope, get economies of scale, get volume. Make sure that all our cars over a period of time are going to be all electric or hybrid vehicles. That's how you bring down the price. And I don't know if it's going to work. It has worked. It worked back in the 70s when it came to fuel efficiency standards. Look where we are today. We have tripled the number of EV sales just in the last few years. We have brought down the price by over 1/3. You know, the Leaf is now $15,000, $16,000. The Bolt, $15,000, $16,000. And we can do better than that if we keep our eye on the goal, keep our eye on the standard that this legislature put in place and re-established us a couple of years ago. That's what the business community needs. That's when we make our investments. That's when we double down. That's when we know we're going to build more charging stations because we know what this market's going to look like in 10 years. If you're just going to willy-nilly change it, no, I don't know if we're going to make it, I feel, that's where everybody hits the pause button. Look, I can't guarantee you what the future will bring. You know, maybe the price of lithium triples or something happens to cobalt. You know, we can deal with that as a consortium later if we have to deal with that. But I think right now, what I love is the fact that this is not Connecticut going alone. It's not Connecticut and California, which gets everybody's hair on fire, but it's Connecticut, it's Virginia, it's North Carolina, it's Colorado, it's New Mexico. There's a broad base. Almost 40% of the American population is leading in this direction. Business likes this, clear goals. This is what we got to do. This is how you bring down the price. This is how you make it affordable. Going the other way, pulling the plug, changing our mind will take us in the wrong direction. So look, I really look forward to working with our friends in the legislature. You've been amazing. You took the lead on this before. You're taking the lead on it again. Reach across the aisle, see if we can satisfy some of the naysayers, get them on board, just like they were until recently, and see if we can keep Connecticut on a track that's going to make a difference for us and our kids. Thanks, everybody.
All right, any questions?
What's plan B? We were led to believe that we'd be hearing some ideas for the next steps. We heard some things from legislators talking about perhaps adopting what New Mexico and Colorado have done. I'd like to hear from you. Where is your administration going? What are the next steps?
Look, I'm with Matt, I'm with Marty. We're going to sit down and talk. A lot of people said, oh my gosh, you're not going to get there. 11 years is too far off. We're going to fail in getting the electric grid or the charging stations. I've heard all the naysayers, and I am from Missouri. Show me. And I'd like to think that, like Matt said, look, we'll maybe follow what they're doing in Colorado and New Mexico. And maybe every 2 or 3 years, the legislature wants to take a second look. Are we keeping to our roadmap? Are we honoring the deals we did? Then we keep going. If we have to change, we do. Give the legislature a little more overview there. I think that may get us over the finish line. But any other thoughts, you guys?
I think a lot of people were confused about reg review as well. If that regulation had gone forward and not passed, right, had been rejected, under the statutes, the legislature could take it up anyway. By doing it this way, you give a little more flexibility on time, give us a chance to have a caucus with members and get feedback. Roland and I were talking about a caucus. We're having a caucus, and Jason, next Monday on this. So we want to move with speed, but legislators, I don't think the public cares about reg review. What they care about is the end result, and that's what our focus is on, is how do we get to the next step, not what happened yesterday.
Matt, if you're not in a position to give us a solution today, which is not surprising, can you go through the likely options? You did a little bit of that yesterday with me talking about the approach in Colorado and New Mexico. So can you outline what are the possibilities, the possible approaches? Do they include simply putting the regs that failed into statute, doing that in concert with
Marty, why don't you come
periodic
to this?
review? So if you quickly run through those.
You can't really amend the regs. Let's be clear about that, right? You have two sets of standards,
Well,
but
you can be in or out, you can do that.
yeah, and also I had members, just like I said, I had a member reach out and say, I don't know enough about what Connecticut does for tax breaks, for example. Could we do more? Are we looking to, what could Connecticut do to help further drive down the costs for individuals of low income? Where's the progressivity in our environmental tax code, was the question asked of me. So these are things that have nothing to do with the regs that we can look at. But I think the Senate President and I, we're having a conversation. Some have said that another affirmative vote 5 years down the road might be something some people were interested in. That's what the governor alluded to as well. Yeah.
Right, exactly. I think that this does have to be a process where we do a sort of incremental review because things are changing rapidly in the world of technology, as we know. The number of people who are buying electric vehicles is increasing significantly. It's still a relatively, the part of the overall universe, relatively small, but it's growing dramatically and impressively every year. But we have to look at issues that have to do with the accessibility to charging, the concern that people have over range anxiety. Many of these concerns may be addressed in a significant way in a couple of years. And so that's why I think a review process every few years behooves us to adopt. Now, We have not, as a caucus, yet met to discuss this. We were waiting for the the Regs Review Committee process to come to a conclusion. So we, like the House, we will at some point relatively soon start to talk with our members about their view on what we might do legislatively, and then the Speaker and I will try to get to a consensus with the Governor on where we should be.
It's my understanding after speaking with Representative Jason and Charleston State and South that Colorado and New Mexico are following California standards. The timeline is a little different, and there are more options to reassess. So is that part of the legislation that you want to propose for a special session?
We have to caucus it. We really have to caucus it. But I will say, there was a groan about legislative review. This is a statute, folks. It can get changed every year. Every odd year, there'll be 42 bills dealing with this topic that will get public hearings. So the reality is there's nothing you can do to wish away further legislative oversight. So.
For the last 10 years, the most innovative technology company in the world.
Susan,
One
thank you for
thing,
your question.
thanks to one thing also on this issue is that the Speaker, sir, the Speaker just mentioned earlier that no issue exists in isolation. Every issue exists in combination with other issues. So we are going to need a significant state investment in infrastructure to implement where we hope to be by 2035. We are going to have to put a lot more state money into building charging stations in areas of the state. Some people will do that privately. The state is going to have to spend a lot of money on that. The state is also going to have to spend more money in terms of giving tax breaks for the foreseeable future for people who buy the electric vehicle. So that has to be factored into our revenue structure. We will need, of course, additional revenue in order to do that, as well as to meet all of the other existing needs. We can't just say we're going to do that and ignore other things. So this becomes part of an overall discussion on overall policy.
And the other question I had regarding the gas-powered vehicles, and that caused a lot of pushback. There were a lot of people who didn't really understand. They thought that they could have those cars, they could, with new sales. Is that something that's still part of this proposal? I mean, obviously you want to phase out gas-powered vehicles, but is that part of this? Because that clearly was very controversial for a lot of people.
I may defer to the commissioner on this and my co-chair, but we adopted California emission standards, and as such, they have banned the combustible engine by 2035. And so our regulatory framework needs to be in line with those emission standards. Similarly, we adopted the medium heavy duty emission standards. So at this point, no plan to do away with a ban altogether. As I said, manufacturers are moving in that direction. Consumers want this, they want these cars at a more affordable price. We are set up in the state of Connecticut. We are receiving unprecedented federal funds to set up the infrastructure involved with this. You are seeing EV rebates at the federal level, EV rebates that are higher than ever at the state level, and for both used and new vehicles. So we're really positioning ourselves well here from a financial standpoint to move towards the elimination of the combustible engine.
Senator Lilly, you said this is in part due to the naysayers in the Republican Party. The administration withdrew the regulations on the belief that 2 members of your caucus were going to be opposed. So, what if you could address that question.
Yes, the answer is we're going to look ahead and not behind. And we're going to look to adopt legislation. I think some of the members of our caucus who were concerned reflected some of the things mentioned here earlier about the impact on the urban poor and also the impact on rural communities and farmers with gas-fueled equipment. So obviously these are concerns that many people share, and we're looking to address all of that as we go forward.
And I know you're looking ahead, but some of the comments here today seem to indicate that there were missed signals, that there were perhaps not the groundwork laid with the public to pass these regulations. So what have you learned, and anybody else who wants to address it, what has this moment taught you about where Connecticut is and how do you sell Connecticut on the need to go forward?
I don't think we need to point any fingers at those who did or did not, advocate effectively on this. But I think what we need to point out is just that we now are in a better position to have an understanding of the key issues in this process. As the Speaker said, we will be having caucuses and move forward with what we hope will be a consensus bill that can pass both chambers and that the Governor will sign.
Where are you
on this concept Marty was just talking a second ago, more state money. How much money are we talking about, and what is your position on that?
Well, first of all, as Christine said, we've got a ton of federal money coming in terms of incentives, $50 million for charging stations up and down our major thoroughfares. Look, this electric vehicle roadmap is a roadmap. It's going to be the private sector and innovation that comes in. Everybody says, I want to see a plan. This is, the free market is already addressing these things, Chris, very aggressively. And they're going to be making sure, if they know that it's all EVs or hybrids by 2035, we have the charging stations where the cars are. And to Marty's point, if we find there's some areas of the estate, like urban areas, where they're getting left behind in terms of charging stations, we'll take a look at that and step up and make sure everybody's taken care of.
Governor, do you agree with the speaker who took a fairly pointed shot at Pura regarding Pura's willingness to support a rate structure that allows the investments that Mr. Sullivan spoke of today?
Look, you have to be able to make the investments to make sure the power's there for the charging stations. I like what we're doing in terms of smart meters. I mean, everybody's saying it's going to cost $1,000 to, charge your car, and we're going to run out of power. Smart meters means we're not going to be adding to the peak load, because many people will be able to charge their cars off-peak in the middle of the night at half the price. These are the type of things that Pura will take into account to make sure that we align our grid with our greater goals.
There was direct criticism by the speaker and implicit criticism by Senator Looney of the UI rate case. Do you agree with that? Do you think that Pura's approval of rates was, what they proved was deficient regarding building out the grid?
I got to take a look at that. What I do know is I want to make sure that Eversource and UI have all the incentives they need to make sure we have the power for the fast charging stations where we need it.
Could there be more incentives for companies to put charging stations at their locations?
So let's wait and see. I mean, in this sense, we have got thousands of charging stations have been installed. Most of it, the free market is going there. I think you'll find more companies and more parking areas and more paid parking lots are putting in charging stations. My church is putting in a paid charging station. People are doing this as a way to attract business. Along the way, we'll see if we have to do other things to give incentives for places that may be getting left behind.
The inability to get this through the normal regulatory review process, where does that bump this issue in terms of your priorities in the upcoming session?
Yeah.
We're caucusing Monday, right? For us to caucus within a week, that's a little unusual, so it's a high priority, absolutely. We're caucusing next Monday. UConn plays North Carolina Tuesday, we'll see where Wednesday goes.
Commissioner, where you are? There you are. I didn't think it was possible to hide behind Senator Looney, but there you are.
Oh, where's that going? Oh.
Next question?
The focus today is on 2035, but this has a schedule of phasing out gas-powered the sale of new gas-powered cars. So what is the time issue? Is there is there pressure to do this quickly to keep those year-by-year goals in place?
As Senator Cohen mentioned, there are two options because states are preempted from putting in their own emission standards or regulating the emissions of or emission standards for vehicles on manufacturers, which is what these regulations do. So we will default to the EPA standard, or we will move forward with the California program. And the California program requires a 3-year lead time to give manufacturers advance notice of when the state will be implementing those standards. So in order to implement the standards effective for the 2027 model year, the regulations would have to be adopted by the end of this calendar year. If this moving into 2024 would give us the opportunity to implement the California standards for the 2028 model year. And I also just wanted to note that there's a lot of funding available for EV charging and EV rebates. The Connecticut Clean Air Act included over $20 million of bonding to support clean vehicle adoption for medium and heavy duty. It also provided for permanent funding for the cheaper program which includes incentives for new and used vehicles and a doubled incentive for low to moderate income purchasers. And the PURA has implemented a docket. They're in their third year of that program to enable the utilities to provide rebates for customers to install chargers at their workplace and at their homes. And so that program calls for up to 60,000 of chargers to be deployed over a 10-year period.
I have just two comments and one poll. My name is Phil Levine. I'm part of the leadership of the EV Club of Connecticut.
I'll check in with you in a second. Thanks, everybody.
Governor.
Governor, thank you. Thank you.